Before I start, I came to Vienna for the first time, and I really wish, when I was going to Vienna, I really wished it would be in different moment in a year, because it's already cold, it's already Christmas here around the town, but we don't have snow yet. So I wanted to visit Vienna either when it's already snowy in late December, or when it's green everywhere. But when I came here today, and actually I was on my way because my hostel is on the other side of the Christmas market. So when I was going through the Christmas market, I suddenly felt again like a kid, because there were so many toys around and they all looked beautiful. In my town, in Kraków, in Poland, the Christmas market is much smaller. It doesn't have this atmosphere. If I can ask you, how many of you are actually from Vienna? And how many of you were in Vienna as a kid? Okay, I invite you, I really invite you. So when I was walking through this Christmas market and I saw so many toys, the teddy bears, the Santa Clauses, and all those other beautiful toys, I felt that it's a bit like my history with web development, because if you know the concept of toys on the attic, you know, when I go to a Christmas market, I get this urge that because all these toys are so nice, I really would like to buy something. But after you buy a lot of toys, you end up not using most of them. You focus on the few ones that you like at the moment, and the rest end up on the shelf, then in a box, and then there's no more space for them. So you put them either into the basement, you give them away, or you put them on the attic. And when the toys lie in the attic, they think of you and they miss the time when you were playing together. And they still hope that one day you will come and use them again and will have fun again. And that's exactly what happens when we switch from framework to framework, from programming language to another programming language. Because the world of technologies, the world of internet runs so fast that we even if we're not professional developers, even if we are hobbyists, we still look for the best solution for us. And especially if some frameworks are not used by the community anymore, because all other users moved to another solution. So you end up moving away to find your new toy, new programming toy again. I'm sorry if you feel offended that I'm comparing our work tools for toys. I have huge respect for all the frameworks I've worked with. And why I'm talking about it is because I will be talking today about real-time apps with Vue.js and Feathers. And trust me, a few years ago, even I will say 2 years ago, I hated Feathers with passion. I was a fan of a framework that was called Meteor. When I was on the Christmas market, there were also stars everywhere. And in my country, in Poland, there's this tradition that we start the Christmas supper only after the first star shined. But you know this popular concept of a falling star, and Meteor is such a falling star, not only because it's a meteor, but also because Meteor used to be the real star of real-time, of the world of real-time web applications. But at some point, it just started to drop down, and at this moment in time, not many people, I don't want to say nobody, because I know a lot of people who still use Meteor, but it's not as popular as it used to be. I was also among the people who needed to find their new tools. And I was investigating a lot of them. How many of you worked with Meteor in the past? How many of you worked with feathers? I will introduce Meteor in a short speech. Meteor started as one of two first robust Node.js frameworks. There was Hapi and there was Meteor. If you know the Node.js backend ecosystem, most of the frameworks on Node.js are so-called micro frameworks, like Express, Koa, Micro. Yeah, there's even a Node.js framework called Micro. People divided to two camps. One of them wanted to just use this small framework called Express, but others wanted a full-blown solution with lots of features. And Meteor had this brilliant idea to combine backend programming with front-end programming. It provided a platform where you could just use the same code on both front-end and both backend without really having to write a binding and a wiring for that. It was such a promising concept that a lot of developers wanted to jump the train and started to using it. After some time, it turned out that during the development phase, some of the decisions the team had to make, because it was just the beginning of Node.js evolution. So a lot of the decisions were more of experiments. There was nobody before. So some of those experiments didn't really go in the right way. That's why now Meteor is not as popular as it used to be. Even Evan You, author of Vue.js, used to be a member of Meteor development group. At some point, he actually offered his company, at some point he even offered his company that, hey, you are investigating, you are looking for a new solution because you want to replace your front end with tool that right now is a thing, and you're looking into Angular, you're looking into React, which is, it was back then, it was 2015, so React was becoming to be hugely popular. But I've got this new tool called the Vue.js, so maybe we will make Vue.js the front end for Meteor. And they said, okay, we like your tool, but nobody uses it, so let's go with React. Well, today we've got 2018, Meteor is, let's say, not as popular as it used to be. Vue.js is at the very top. Times change, and just like I said with the toys that are lying on the attic, Meteor is now at the attic. And since then, I switched my toys a few times, and right now, such a toy is feathers. It was probably too long, right? I should have some more slides, probably. Okay, I started talking about real time, but I cannot actually make this talk without explaining what actually are real-time apps. There are a few use cases in web development where you want your applications to give you feedback instantly, and not only when you asked for it, but also when something on the backend actually changed. The most popular of those use cases, and we will see today such an example of such an application, are chats and messengers, because when we have many users and you write something, you of course see your message. If you write it with Vue.js, you see your message, but you don't see it when other users write their own messages, because there is no response from the server, because there was no request. So real-time applications are meant to provide a way for front-end developer to get feedback from the server in real time, that is all the time getting new messages. Another use case, presence, because in a chat we need offline and users go offline and online, and we need to see it. Collaborative editors. How many of you use Code Sandbox? Code Sandbox is recently getting more and more popular in Vue.js world, and if you didn't try it, I highly recommend you. It's an amazing tool that I rate much higher than CodePen or JS Fiddle. And it also provides a way to use Code Sandbox collaboratively, is that the word? Where two developers can actually, in real time, that's why we have real-time apps, work on the same sandbox and work on one application in one editor. Alert and push notifications, broadcasting updates and visualizations. To give you an example, if we are betting on sport games, we need to get the results, and not only when we refresh our page, but all the time if the results change. We need to know that at this very moment, because it's very important for us, because we're betting our own money. That's why it's also a good use case for real-time applications. Multiplayer game synchronization. I am very lucky that we had actually a game in our first talk. It was Tetris, and when I was sitting there, I was thinking, hey, why didn't I bring a game like Miroslav did? And I was even thinking of taking your Tetris and put it in here on the screen and making it playable for two players from the audience, so we could play Tetris together for the better score. But it would take too much time, and I'm probably already in half of my talk before I even started it. Internet of Things, that's highly important. Imagine that you come inside to your apartment, and the moment you come into your flat, your TV starts working. How does it work? You didn't ask it to work, but thanks to real-time systems that are operating in Internet of Things applications, such things are possible. Implementations. We'll talk about four main ways to implement real-time in our web applications. First one is polling. The first time I heard about polling was when I was becoming to be a front-end developer, because I started at the backend years ago, and the first big framework that I got to know was Angular. When I started developing applications in Angular, and suddenly everything started to be reactive, I thought, hey, maybe I should have my data refreshing all the time. If I can switch routes without refreshing the page, then maybe I can get data without refreshing the page. So I had this idea that I will send a request to the server every 10 seconds. And that was a very bad idea. That's exactly what polling means. It's sending a request to HTTP server through HTTP. In time intervals. It can be 30 seconds, it can be 10 seconds. No matter how many seconds you take, it's always a bad idea, because there are three better solutions. One of them is long polling. It may sound that if polling is bad, then long polling would be also bad, but actually among the biggest websites on the internet, like Twitter, like Facebook, they feel real time, because the feed of messages updates from time to time. You get to know that there are a few new messages. If you think about Vue.js forum, how many of you go to Vue.js forum? It's based on Discourse platform, and on Discourse forum when you browse the topics, when you read a longer topic, you suddenly get notifications that in some other topic somebody mentioned you or somebody wrote another message. That's exactly what they achieve with long polling. How does it differ? With long polling, when you send the request, you don't get the response. What's the English word? Immediately, exactly. Thanks a lot. The server waits with the response until there actually is a change in data. Because with polling, server sends the response immediately. This response may be the same, or the change may be not noticeable. With long polling, the server decides if this change in data actually important for the user. Websites like Facebook, like Twitter, use this very method. But what I will be talking about today are WebSockets. How many of you used WebSockets? Maybe I don't actually need to explain it, but let's just go through the basics. WebSockets provide a persistent connection between the client and the server. It's an upgraded protocol from HTTP, so we are not any longer on HTTP connection, but on another connection. And thanks to that, we can send messages not only from the client to the server, but also server can emit events back to the client, not back to the client, but whenever a server wants. It's similar to how Vue.js events work, because the parent can pass the props, so that is, or the parent can listen to the event, and the server can emit this event. But with WebSocket solutions, it works more similar to the event bus. On event bus, we can both emit, using event bus, we can both emit the events and listen to the events from multiple different components. Last solution is server sent events. And this solution is probably the future of internet. Why people claim that it's a better solution than WebSockets? WebSockets have, as much as they have a lot of advantages, the biggest advantage of WebSockets, other than good real-time experience, is that WebSockets have very low payload. When you initiate a HTTP request with polling or long polling, even if you don't send any data to the server or a small amount of data, the request will still be big, because together with the data you send to the server, there is there's a big header going with every next request. On WebSockets, you send a header only at the very beginning. Then, with every next event you emit, every next data you pass to the server, or in the other way, you no longer need to send any header, so the payload is very small. But even with this advantage, many developers and, like I said, companies like Facebook or Twitter don't want to use WebSockets. Main problem for that is that WebSockets don't work well with HTTP2. And HTTP2 is the new standard that is quickly become more and more popular. And it's because it's difficult to combine WebSockets with HTTP2, big companies try to adopt a new solution, that is server sent events. What we have written here, it's a one-way publish-subscribe communication. Publish-subscribe is a pattern where when you send an event, you repeat this event every time a change in your data, there's a change in your data, and you emit this event to everybody, whoever will want to listen to it. So similarly, like it was in V1 times, or like it's with the event path. So all the clients that want this data just need to subscribe. They need to run the subscribe function, and if they have all the requirements to get this data, for example, they're authenticated, and this user should actually get this data, they will get it. Does it work? Okay. Let's go through the different implementations of buckets that we can use with, or libraries that we can use with Vue.js to write a real-time web app. We already talked about Meteor. Meteor has a few alternatives. Out of those two, Deepstream and Serves, I would recommend Deepstream. Deepstream works on a bit different idea, because with Deepstream, each of your servers is actually a client. It's a client. It's it may be difficult to explain for me, but I would recommend you to check it. The problem with Deepstream is that the company behind it, it's a German company, did what Meteor also did. They tried to make it a business, and this business didn't really go very well, so it's already closed. But now they are focused back on the open source server of Deepstream, and it's well supported. So check it out. The other solution is Serves. We also have real-time backends that come as a service, so you don't really host your backend, but you get probably pushers shouldn't be there, because we usually use pushers just to push messages. But Firebase is a good example of such a system. Problem of Firebase in comparison to Meteor, Feathers, or Deepstream or Serves is that because you don't have the access to all your server, you can't manipulate it the way you want. You are limited to the API that you get from the service such as Firebase. Then we have WebSocket libraries that we can use to create our own simple real-time system. The most popular in Node.js world is Socket.io, and it's also a library that is used by Feathers under the hood. Socket Cluster is what I decided to investigate at the very beginning, because the idea is, I like the idea about it. Socket Cluster is written for maximum scalability. But the community around it is not as big to generate a mass of users that would actually bring that actually make it important, and it would bring authors of tutorials, authors of courses. So there are not many learning materials for that, and Sock.js is a similar solution. It was used under the hood in Meteor. Finally, we have GraphQL subscriptions. With GraphQL, we also can achieve real-time experience. A good example for Vue.js is Vue Apollo library maintained by Actium, by Guillaume Chau. It's not a coincidence that Guillaume Chau is also responsible for the integration library for Vue Meteor, because Apollo is created by the same company. And I think that's the last slide that I've got prepared, so let's see some code. Oh, that's too far, that's too far. Okay. Actually, before we start the code, when we were we had a short talk by a representative of Certable, and we saw a lovely map, so I thought I will show you a map too. This is a website called ViewPeople. It's written by a company from Budapest, so not far from here, and we can see 1,500 users of Vue.js from around the world, but let's see how many of them are in Vienna. Wait, there are 6. If I didn't ask you how many of you are from Vienna, I would think that most of you came from Budapest. So once you come home, be sure to open ViewPeople and create an account. It's easy because you can use your GitHub account, so it doesn't take much time. And that's all about the map. So we're going to talk about Feathers. Feathers is an open source Node.js framework that's got quite nice documentation, and we won't go through this documentation because we are already probably late. You can see that we've got 2 different projects. One is for our backend application, that is Feathers application. Another is for our front-end applications. Why is that? Why can't we just combine them? Why can't we have both in one project? With Vue CLI, it wouldn't be possible, but for example, with Nuxt.js, how many of you use Nuxt.js? That makes us 2. With Nuxt.js, you could actually use the Create Nuxt app project to combine your Node.js backend with frontend under one server process. So why I didn't go for this solution, even if it's possible with Feathers.js. When I was in Toronto, after the workshops, we had a talk with Sebastian Chopin from Node.js, with Evan You, and with Guillaume Chau, the author of Vue CLI, and we were wondering if it would be a good idea. I didn't dare to speak loud my own opinion because I didn't feel good enough of a developer. All of them said, no, we don't like it. So even if Nuxt.js allows such a setup with both backend and frontend on one server process on Node.js, even if many developers who didn't try it before and they don't have experience with it think it would be good to try that. Don't do this. Nobody really wants to support such a setup. Let's go back to our Feathers application. How do we create our Feathers application? Actually, we would use CLI. With CLI, is it big enough? Probably. We would write a comment like that: Feathers generate app, and we would call it somehow, and it would generate our project. So it works like Vue CLI, but what differs Vue CLI and Feathers CLI is that with Feathers we can generate actual important files of our project, so it's closer to Angular or Ember world. With Vue CLI, with Nuxt.js, we can generate our project, but we can't really generate components out of the box. We can't generate Vuex modules. Maybe in the future there will be such tools, maybe even as plugins for Vue CLI. Who knows? Maybe I will actually sit and write something similar. So this application is the official example application. It's not written by me because I wanted to give you the experience as close to the documentation as possible. But even if we use the standard setup on the backend, on the front end, we don't use the raw Fevers client. Why I say client? Website real-time applications are most of the real-time systems are based on the idea that the backend library also provides a client library. The backend library has a spy on the client that can sneak the messages to the client or spy and listen to events emitted by the client. Usually they do it with WebSockets, but what I like about Fevers so much is that Fevers is not limited to WebSockets like Meteor was. With Fevers, you can actually every message that gets sent through WebSockets can be also read through HTTP. If you send a RESTful request to the Fevers server, it will give you actual proper answer, response. Fevers on the backend is based on two general ideas, and they both are abstractions. What's very important is that Fevers is not a framework built from scratch. Fevers is just an abstraction, a middleware based on top of Express. And from the new version of Fevers, you can even replace Express with whatever you want if you prefer to use Koa because you like the ecosystem around Koa, their plugins. Then you can just replace the underlying routing logic of Express with Koa and it will still work. The same way you can replace Socket.io with another WebSocket library like Socket Cluster or Primus. So I mentioned that there are two main abstractions that we'll use, and first of them are so-called services. In this application, we have two services. One is called messages and one is called users. As you can imagine, those services are corresponding to the models in the database. So each model that we want represented on our, ultimately we want it represented on our client, we will define as a service. Why the services are important? Services are objects that provide a set of methods, and it's a set of methods corresponding to HTTP methods like get, find, update, remove, all the CRUD methods. Can I ask you, how do we pronounce CRUD in English? C-R-U-D? CRUD. CRUD. Okay, I'll try to remember that for the future. Okay, so based on the services, we can, yes? 5 minutes. And we didn't go to code. Let's start with running our server, running our client. Our client, you can see that it's called Fevers Chat Vuex. Why it's called like that? Because we don't act, not here. Yeah, they're working. Okay, we've got our chat application. We will talk about the code implementation for that. What I wanted to say is that we don't, in this example, we don't use the official client for Fevers because there's a dedicated client for Vue.js. And this client library called Fevers Vuex, which I've got for you over here. Yeah. Is one of the libraries made by the community of Fevers. You can see that there's a dedicated library for Redux and also a dedicated library for GraphQL, because with Fevers we can, as well as we can get our data through WebSockets, or we can get our data through RESTful request. We can also request our data through a GraphQL client. So we've got our chat and it wants us to log in. Like I said, we've got two services. I'm sorry, I'm trying to rush. That's why I got, no. We can see that we have two models, and the database I use under the hood, because when you create a service in Fevers, we can choose which underlying database we want to use, or which ORM. This one is NEDB. NEDB is a very tiny database that runs actually on our server in JSON files. Do we actually? Yeah, we have here a folder called data, and inside we have our messages collection and our user collection. It's empty right now. There's only index. So let's try to fill our database. How do we do that? By creating a user. Sign up, and we are on our chat. We have one user in our chat. Let's try creating another user. As we see, when we send a message from krakowvue.js.org user, it's actually visible to all the users on our chat. How does it work? When we send our message, we actually emit an event to the server that tells the server, dear server, create a message because I want to send the message to my friend from Vienna. And the server says, okay, I will create the message for you, but let me see if I wanted to do something else also. At this moment, the server looks for hooks. We have our hooks folder, and inside of our services, each service has hooks. Hooks are an array where we have before hooks, after hooks, and error hooks. Let's leave the errors because I don't want errors in our code. For each of the methods that I was talking, each of the RESTful methods, we can decide that we want to additionally run some function before we save this message to the database, or after we send it. In our case, before we send a message, we first of all check if we are authenticated, and then when we create our message, we call process message. Yes. If you want to see more of this talk, I will upload it to YouTube and make it. And I will actually try to take your game and use it instead of our chat. Do I have the permission for that? Okay, then on YouTube we'll be able to play Tetris made with RxJS using with 2 users and try to score the top result. I will provide a reward. I don't know what reward, but there will be a reward. There will be a reward for the best result in our Tetris game. And there was one very good slide that I wanted to show you. That's this slide. Thank you very much.